Hello and welcome everyone to this week's edition of Wednesday seminar. We are coming to you today with a very topical topic, wireless vulnerability, India's dependency on Chinese telecom. As we approach the first anniversary of Press Note 3, which was issued in April last year, prohibiting Chinese investments and requiring them to obtain government approval, it is of the most urgency to examine what kind of dependency we have on China. There has been a lot of debate about reducing dependency from a trading perspective and investment perspective. But technology remains one of the crucial pillars because India is on the verge of rolling out its next generation telecom networks. And almost as a surprise, last week, many of us saw a news report which said one of our telecom companies had awarded Huawei with a 300 crore order. So in the context of that, today we are joined by an extremely knowledgeable, distinguished, and also a panel with a lot of hands-on experience on this topic. So I will now introduce each of the speakers in the order in which they will make their presentations. First, we have Ambassador Smita Purushottam, who served as India's ambassador to Venezuela, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and the Holy See. She also spent time as India's economic counselor in Beijing, where she had first-hand experience of China's economic reforms. Today, she comes to us to speak in her current avatar as the founder of the non-profit Do Tank, SITARA, a science, indigenous technology, and advanced research accelerator, which aims to bring increased vigor to the indigenization of high-tech production and building a science nation in India. Welcome, Ambassador Purushottam. Our second speaker is Mr. Rajiv Mahajan, who is the Senior Vice President at Tejas Networks and is a member of the core startup team, which drives sales and marketing for the company. He also takes a keen interest in public policy, working towards supporting and promoting domestic manufacturing with value addition, product development, and IP creation in India. He holds a master's degree of computer science from BITS Pilani and is an engineering graduate from Jamia Millia Islamia in New Delhi. Welcome, Mr. Mahajan.
Thank you.
Our third speaker will be Ms. Charulata, who is a solutions architect with Larsen & Toubro Smart World and Military Communications. Her expertise lies in network requirements in routing, switching, microwave and mesh radio, LTE base stations, EPC, IMS application servers with QoS, RF planning, cell planning, power and weight budgets for deployment scenarios. She has also worked previously for Huawei, so we hope to get a very interesting perspective of her from both sides, so to speak, of the technology divide we are going to talk on. Welcome, Ms. Charulata. Our last speaker will be Mr. Parag Naik, who is the CEO at Sankhya, and he has 28 years of industry experience. Parag is considered one of the foremost experts on software-defined radios, SDR, and cognitive radios as a technology for telecom broadcasting, and is one of the inventors of the 5G broadband technology. He's a named inventor in more than 40 international patents in the areas of VLSI design, CPU SDR architecture, digital communications, signal processing, and hardware software co-design and code generators. Welcome, Mr. Naik.
Thank you.
I request each of the speakers to take about 10 to 12 minutes to take us through their presentation. And while doing so, I urge them to keep terminology to the simplest possible level, because most of our audience members are not from a technology background, but at the same time are very keen to understand what is the impact of our dependency on China, how to overcome it, and how did we get here, and so on. And at the end of all the presentations, I will start routing questions to them, sourced from the chat box. So I request all the listeners to type your questions in the chat box or signal your intention to ask a question by using the raise hand button. Thank you. Ambassador Purushottam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your very kind introductions. And also, I wish to thank ICS and Ambassador Shokant for this absolutely brilliant opportunity for us to talk about our passion, which is how to promote, a high-tech domestic industry, retain value in India, and also to highlight the risk, that the Chinese ownership of Indian telecom networks poses. So, without much ado, I shall jump into this issue. And first, I want to just outline what is the full scope of the risk and the danger, in fact, that we're facing because of the Chinese information warfare doctrine. On the one hand, we had a country which understood the full strategic nature and the capabilities that information and communications technologies have given to it. And I was in Beijing at the time when India was signing the information technology agreement, which I was not aware of. And that also shows the siloed approach, of governance, because they understood the importance of ICTs. Their research community had brought out a really comprehensive thesis on this in that book, Unrestricted Warfare, in which a lot of the things that they're practicing today in information warfare has been outlined in that particular book. Now, our defense and weapons acquisitions policy, for example, addresses only kinetic, physical, visible assets, whereas in China they have kept pace with developing technologies and are leveraging invisible capabilities such as ICTs to completely change how they will conduct war, because ICTs are the ultimate non-attributable stealth weapon. By deploying them, you can avoid a casus belli under international law because most often you can't trace the origin. Also, China aims to have a world-class military in 2049 with informatization at its core. It's quite a mouthful, but anyway, I did it. But you don't have to accept my word for it. The Defense White Paper of China long ago had placed this at the core of its military doctrine. And they also did these organizational reforms. Again, contrast that with us, our Ministry of Defense hasn't changed shape at all in many years. And the Strategic Support Force was set up, in fact, to gain complete, to seamlessly integrate information domains and therefore gain complete battlefield advantage by stitching together all the information from all battlefield domains to give that overview. And this, of course, they got this from the Americans. In the early 90s, the Americans had already deployed the US Global Information Grid to conduct the Gulf War, for example. And interesting anecdote, I was at Harvard when my course mate, Senior Colonel Chen Zhao, was studying the Gulf War. And he has been totally scrubbed from the net. And I can only speculate as to the reason why, but I have captured. I Googled him a couple of years ago. He was still on the net, but for some reason he's disappeared. It could be because of the American drive to find out who all have been in their universities and benefited from those advantages. So I think you all are aware of what network-centric warfare is. Basically, it's connecting weapons in different domains through sensors and command and communications grids to the command and control centers. Again, this gives you a 360-degree overview of the battlefield and a tremendous advantage because of the tremendous amount of information available to the battlefield commander. China is not stopping here. It's going to the next level of lethality, which is intelligentization. And you, again, don't have to accept my word for it. It's there in the Defense White Paper. And Elsa Kanya has written a fantastic book, Battlefield Singularity, on this. And this presages, along with the technologies in which China is gaining a huge advantage, which is 5G, quantum tech, hypersonics. All of these are transformative technologies. And also it is leveraging the advantages in the civilian commercial sector through the concept called military civil fusion to augment its military capabilities. So on the one hand, again, you have an indigenous, huge modernizing, digitizing, intelligentizing industry. On the other, you have an imported weapons park, Chinese control of communication systems, which my co-panelists will talk about, and several uncoordinated strategies and very, very incremental reform of defense structures, acquisitions policies, and so on. Now, this is about wartime. What about peacetime? Why are we pleading for, why have we pleaded for the last 3 years with government to look at removing foreign and especially Chinese control of our telecommunications networks? Basically, it has been shown in various investigations. I don't think India has the capability to do that, but the backdoors, the things that they have inserted, in chips, for example, the Micron servers, and the weaponization of the information doctrine basically poses a huge threat to us even in civilian times. And this risk will be exponentially magnified if the Chinese companies enter the 5G network. So one of our basic campaigns was to sensitize the government about these risks and have them removed from there. Now, the other huge risk is, of course, economic security. The Chinese have, and Shri Rajiv Mahajan will elaborate on this, have systematically grabbed all the tenders by ruthlessly and deliberately underbidding. The costing system is definitely not as competitive as all that. And they started this only after they found Indian competition. So all these tenders for smart cities, surveillance networks, and all sorts of other infrastructures, information infrastructures are going to foreign companies. And all this is a huge, huge economic drain akin to the drain that used to happen during colonial times. And then we wonder why India is so poor, because hundreds, thousands of lakhs of crores are being spent on foreign equipment. And I'm sorry to say that this has also something to do with a lot of flawed procurement practices in our country. We've tried to put together through media reports the serious attacks on Indian civilian and other infrastructure. And you can see that they've targeted very, very key sectors of our economy, whether it's vaccine development or the nuclear power plant. And on the Mumbai blackout, we had been writing to the Power Ministry for months, telling them, warning them, and discussing this in our group also, that the Chinese penetration of our our power grids had opened us up to blackouts and to basically remotely switching off our power grids from foreign shores. But unfortunately, it was not listened to. And now there is a lot of denial about this. But the fact is that I hope Shri Rajiv Mahajan talks about it. We had taken up the issue of fiber home, which won a power grid tender against our protests. These are all on the right-hand side, you can see all the groups that we managed to collate, which have been targeting key sectors in India. Now, I'm coming to SITARA's work and solutions. We've been working very hard, in fact, for 10 years, but in the last 3 years, we consolidated it under SITARA. And we've been going physically to ministries, we've been writing letters, and an enormous amount of work has gone in sensitizing the government and informing them of the security risks we're running. And we took this up because of both its national security and its economic security implications. McKinsey did a study many, many years ago, and I'm sure those figures have been augmented since then, that countries with robust innovation ecosystems gain a US $33 trillion annual advantage. And if we continue to neglect, domestic procurement of high-tech products domestically, our R&D capacity will forever remain a global south. Now, our primary goal is that we should take the lead in building a domestic system, and this will turbocharge domestic procurement, because some estimates are that domestic procurement in a developing country like India, where central, state, panchayat, at all levels, there's a huge amount of procurement going on, will impart a 40% stimulus to GDP. Now, I must say that we have a lot of achievements, and I also wish to thank, I don't know if they like it or not, the National Security Council Secretariat. Officers there have been extremely, extremely positive and receptive, because right from the beginning, we went to a Foreign Office colleague there, and he and his colleagues professed to be shocked at the information we gave them, mainly about how tenders were skewed deliberately, on which we can do a whole other session. It's really quite a story there. So tenders and procurement reforms, you see, it created an environment. Everything was not directly attributable to SITARA, but we had a huge hand in all this. And the tenders and procurement reform orders have been passed. The PMI has been restored in the form of the PMII. preference to procure in India and make in India. Minimum local content in procurement of 50% have been passed, and so on. And Tejas Networks will tell you of the huge fight we had over the 10D reciprocity clause. We went to the Ministry of Commerce, we went to various ministries, talked to them about this. But the main ground on which action was taken was national security. And for that, I commend our government tremendously. The differential duties were imposed, project exports were agreed by our Ministry of External Affairs. The grants that we give under LOCs, the BSNL tender was revoked. The Telecom Security Directive was passed, and we still need the Telecom Security Act because we need proper parliamentary legislation on this. But SITARA, unfortunately, does not have the capacity to prepare that draft. 5G, the Chinese companies have been debarred, and of course, the apps have been with one of the first things to be removed. There are a lot of obstacles. No domestic company has got any tender as yet, and huge contracts are still being given to foreign countries. So the policies have been passed, but implementation is lacking. Our request for a comprehensive industrial policy, which even the Americans are thinking about, has not gained traction so far because the neoliberal lobby is still very strong in India. There's no attempt to promote R&D, and without this, we are sunk. And there's continued huge pressure from foreign lobbies. The way forward to achieve Prime Minister's vision of true Atmanirbharta would be for the science and technology innovation policy to actually identify ICT in its mission mode projects. It's just left it, without identifying any key projects. We have proposed a Carroll model. We can go into that if anybody is interested, for promoting R&D, restoring R&D incentives. We have money for this. We have the United Services Obligation Fund, which has been used to fund Japanese companies. For some reason, it cannot be used to fund Indian companies. So the DOT mandate is also to promote indigenous development. So we have all these mandates, but unwillingness to take it forward. We also have to be aware that in decoupling, there will be, at least in high technology areas, a lot of decoupling in 5G, of course, in semiconductor manufacturing, which has made the news, but also in communications networks. We have to be careful that we don't fall on the wrong side of this particular wall. And we have been warned also not to have Huawei equipment. So at the same time, we must retain our technological capabilities and not sacrifice our technological independence. My final plea is that the China group, which is fully aware of all the issues concerning our relationship with China, should help us with this indigenization drive. And I especially thank Ambassador Kant, who's always stood by us in this right from the beginning since many years. Also to please help us in sensitizing government to have a technology dimension to its security strategy. And also perhaps we could start a joint China technology watch group. Unfortunately, we don't speak Chinese in our group, and so we may not be much use there, but we can get it from other English language sources, maybe Russian language sources also. So I thank you very much. I hope I haven't exceeded my time, and I'm very happy that my co-panelists are there, and I'm also very keen to listen to them. Thank you, ICS.
Thank you, Ambassador. That was a very nice presentation outlining the risks that India faces. And I now request Mr. Mahajan to start his presentation. And yes, I think the time limit of 12 minutes was adhered to. So I request Mr. Mahajan also to keep his presentation to 10 to 12 minutes.
Sure.
Mr. Mahajan, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I share my screen?
Yes, please. Yes, your screen is now visible, but the presentation is not on. Okay. Yes, you can do a full screen of that. Yes, thank you. Please continue. Yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you very much for the whole group for giving us this opportunity to talk about China threat in telecom networks and also on the wireless networks, which is going to be majorly deployed in India moving forward. We are looking forward to 5G. So this presentation, what we have done, we have sort of kept it in a way. One sec. Yeah. So we have kept in a way that we are talking more about what China is doing, how they are developing their industry, and how India is getting impacted. Because
Mr. Mahajan, sorry, we can't see your slides. It was visible just a minute ago, but I think it's The sharing screen has been paused.
Okay, just one sec.
Maybe you can redo it.
Is it visible?
Yes, yes. You can do a large screen, full screen now and continue. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk at this event. And in today's presentation, as Smita talked about, we are going to talk about various policies which China has adopted to grow very, very fast for themselves, and how they are impacting Indian industry from security point of view and from development of Indian industry, Indian IPR. So briefly, before I get started, I'll talk about Tejas Networks. Tejas Networks, the company which I represent, and I'm part of this company for last 21 years now. This is one of the fastest growing Indian R&D company, which is manufacturing a lot of telecom products. And we are having our own IPR. We are financially very strong. And we are exporting to a lot of countries worldwide, which is one of the milestone we have achieved. If we look at the journey for last 20 years, which we have gone through, we have done a cumulative revenue of around $1 billion and exported around 400 millions. And total R&D and IPRs are done in India. We are amongst the global top 10 optical companies, which is one of the prestige, and hold a lot of patents and IPR in our country. Talking about our customer base, you can look at almost all the telecom service providers in India. They are using Tejas products, and we are deployed in more than 75 countries worldwide. And a list, a brief snapshot of our customers across the globe is given here. So in due course of time, we interacted a lot with the various OEMs, and China was one of the biggest competition which we faced. So we spend a lot of time and energy to understand what China is doing and how they are trying to gain the market worldwide. So when we went into details, we found that China, though joined WTO in 2001, but they didn't sign the government agreement, and under garb of that, they converted whole of their telecom industry, which is one of the fastest growing industry worldwide, into a government owned sector. So they have three telecom service providers which are mentioned here, and all three are government owned, and the OEMs which are supplying to these companies the products which are being deployed in China, they also are government controlled. So because of this, what they achieved was that, let's say in China, government is the operator, owner, and regulator of telecom. So there is no foreign indulgence which is there in that country. So what it led to, because of this policy and because of stopping of being a non-WTO for government procurement, what we can look at is that in 2018, currently at 2018, if we look at OPEM report, which is one of the major market research firm, China owned 97% of Chinese market, optical networking products market, was owned by three companies, which were Huawei, ZTE, and FiberHome. Only 2% was being supplied by Nokia China, because they took over Alcatel Shanghai Bell. So that's the market share they have today. And 1% is with the smaller Chinese companies, which also have some tie-up with the global companies, but 51% stake with these Chinese companies. So basically, there is no Indian or any foreign optical vendor in Chinese market, and it is one of the biggest market which is totally restricted for Chinese products. This is just the optical network equipment market. Now, if we talk about China's switch and router market, which is also a big market, around 3.9 4 billion the market worldwide, 92% of the market is just for Chinese companies, which are Huawei, ZTE, and FiberHome. only 8% market is shared by smaller Chinese firms, Nokia China, Cisco, and various others. But none of the Indian product has any market access in China. So how they did it? So this was a big challenge, let's say in beginning of this century for China also to develop their economy, develop their manufacturing. So what they specifically did, they modified their country's policies in a way that it supports their domestic industry. It supports their domestic products, which ensured that the total spending, whatever China wanted to do on telecom, that stays within the country. If you see this page, which is coming out from a document which is published by US, and this was the testimony which was given by a US company called Infinera, who was trying to get into Chinese market. And what they are saying that there was a lot of incentives given to Chinese telecom operators to buy Chinese products, and they were authorized to give up to 3 times the price of a foreign product to buy Chinese products. And since there were a lot of incentives which were given to them, they were also motivated to buy Chinese products. So Huawei, ZTE, Fiber Home, and other smaller companies, they got a lot of business. Now, they did also one more thing which they did very smartly. They defined their national champions. So they made Huawei and ZTE as 2 national champions for telecom products. And they also reserved 1/3 of the market for Huawei, 1/3 market for ZTE, and rest 1/3 market they kept for other companies like Fiber Home and various other smaller Chinese. So what it said very clearly was that no foreign products to be bought in China. It's only Chinese products which they will buy, and there is a price preference also given to them. I'm specifically mentioning this point, price preference, which was very high. Now this helped these Chinese companies, which are also state-owned companies, to grow. Now there is another caption which I want you to look at. 5G networks, which is going to be globally biggest market driver, and a lot of technology is being developed for 5G. Government of China notified that 2/3 of the market will be for Huawei and ZTE. So there was a lot of motivation for these companies to develop the product, because if 2/3 of the biggest market of the world is with them without any competition, they would have loved to do anything. Now, what additionally they did, these are various things which China did in due course of time to gain control of their market and retain their market for their industry. Now, in 2006, they came out with a strategic product catalog, which was to restrict market access to foreign companies. And in this strategic product catalog, they listed major telecom products and major telecom technologies, that these technologies have to be only procured from domestic players. And if you look at these products, they are the ones which all the telecom operators need, and the requirement is in millions. And India also needs them in big numbers. Now with this, in fact, we went on to look at this document, which was written in Chinese, and we got it translated. We have a Chinese version and English version. If you go to this, it has all the technologies which are required for to develop a telecom network, and whole of this market was blocked only for Chinese players. Now, another thing which I want to share with you, this is Article 10 of Government Procurement Law of China, which clearly says the first point that you have to procure domestic goods only in case those goods don't exist in China, no one manufactures them, then only you are allowed to procure from outside. Now, this ensured that even if a foreign company wants to set up a shop there, they want to manufacture it, no one will buy their product, and the market is just restricted for them.
Mr. Mahajan, I'm sorry, but you'll have to conclude in a minute or two. I know you have plenty of slides, so maybe you can choose some important slides. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So another thing which I want to share is the green book which they have come up with. This also helped them to look at Chinese product. Made in China 25 policy was another policy. And the point I want you all to look at is that they focused on improving value addition. They said that by 2025, 70% of their products should be with Chinese IP and Chinese value addition. These are other policies which they talk about. Moving forward, let me talk a bit about what they did in Indian market. Today, if we look at India's import from China, in 2018, we imported 84,000 crores, right? Versus a export of 0. And these were the products which we had in India, but we could not sell to China, and it was all getting imported. The import was 100 times that we were exporting to China, which is a major stuff. Now, if you look at this slide, specifically want to highlight that if you look at the market share of Indian vendors, in 2012, the market share of Indian vendors in India was 23%, whereas in 2018-19, it went to 7%. And this was all because of onslaught of Chinese and India having open policies, which invited all the foreign vendors. I want to highlight few more points. This slide is very, very important. I will request Santosh to give you 2 more minutes. This is the slide of pricing which Chinese companies have done in Indian market. If you look at, these are 3 tenders which I have mentioned. Look at the price which they have given to just get the market access or kill domestic industry. The third tender is from PGCIL Power Grid. The budgeted price was 350 crores, which company called Fiber Home, a Chinese company, picked up at 99 crores. The BSNL tender, the budgeted price was 648 crore, which they picked up 301 crores, where the US company Corient, which is an aggressive manufacturer, they were at 1,000 crores, and Indian company was at 500 crores. So what they were doing was doing this predatory pricing in India to kill domestic industry, and they were working, all 3 of them were working as a collaborators to win the tenders. Now, Indian government also imposed anti-dumping duty in 2009, which was up to 250%. But still, the onslaught was not stoppable. Now, the need of the hour. Just 2 more minutes, Santoji, so that I conclude this. We need to do something so that our industry survive and we become bigger. Our industry become very big. Now, DOT has come out with a catalog, with a policy which is called PMI Policy, which has 36 products, where they have said that we have sufficient capacity and capability in our country to manufacture these products. Right now, the only thing is that we need to ensure that the policy, PMI policy, is implemented properly so that our companies get market access and they do a lot of stuff. Now, I want to here pause a minute. Thanks our government of India, because they have taken a lot of good steps in the last 1 year, which has helped the industry and which has also blocked Chinese onslaught. And I'm sure in months to come, things will change much, much better. First is Make in India policy by DPIIT, which is supporting industry a lot. Second is reciprocity law, which is 10D, which is part of the policy where the government has said that if any country is not allowing to sell our products in their country, we will also not allow them. So China is blocked there. Then this GFR modification, which is another good point which government has done. Where they are saying we will not buy from bordering country. And then the fourth thing which is coming in June, the trusted source is also going to be a game changer. We just to summarize the overall presentation, China doesn't give fair market access to India or any foreign country. We need to think on this. They have dominated Indian telecom market by killing Indian industry. We need to stop it, which is happening. There are a lot of policies, products, technologies which are existing in India. BSNL's 4G network is a great example. We need to just go ahead and do it on Indian products, and we will see how best Indians can do. And on security grounds and reciprocity grounds, we have to stop Chinese onslaught. Thank you very much. Thank you for the time which you have given.
Thank you, Mr. Mahajan. That was very interesting industry perspective. You have brought out the Chinese market and also the Indian market very well. I request Ms. Chawlata to now commence the presentation, and please stick to 10 minutes. We are now running behind by about 4 to 5 minutes, so hopefully we can offset it. You can just select the most important points and keep it to 10 minutes. Thank you. Chawlata ji. You're mute. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Is the slide now visible?
Yes, but yeah, now it's full screen. Yes, please continue. Thank you.
This is about the indigenization in telecom networks from the system integrator perspective and mainly with respect to L&T. So L&T is into several, it's a conglomerate of several companies dealing with defense, smart world, smart technologies, power, hydrocarbons, construction, which it is well renowned for. And we're into every part of nation building. So with respect to specifically with respect to telecom, L&T is into wired network infrastructure and services, wireless network infrastructure and services, and into tactical and military network. Now, the key challenges that we have, especially with respect to indigenous deployment, is the translation of policies from the literal wording to the actual spirit of the policy. Now, whenever there is this initiative that says that we need to have an indigenous content, how do we define indigenous and how do we make it indigenous? That is going to be that is a key challenge for system integrators. The second we have is the policy influences, where the policy influences ensure that the RFPs are drafted, which are suited for existing players which already have deployments. And the deployments which are already present are mainly non-Indian, because the nature of deployments earlier was before all of this started. All of the PMI initiatives and other Make in India initiatives have started. Then the third factor is the current market proliferation of products. Any deployment has two kinds of deployment. One is a greenfield, which means there is no network and you establish a network for the first time. The second type is a brownfield. Brownfield is that you have a kind of deployment and you're trying to build upon it or improvise it or incrementally increase the capacity. So whenever there is a brownfield deployment, we lose out big time because there is a disadvantage for new entrants. Already there is an existing network. There is a brownfield network comprises around 30 to 50% of the total deployments. Then the key challenge of a system integrator, we are sandwiched between the customer and the OEMs which make the product. The customer has clauses which indicate that all of the risk has to be taken up by the bidder and the rewards are low because any rewards are picked up by the product OEM. So in this case, there is no incentive for a system integrator to take up that risk knowing that the rewards are very, very low. So unless this changes, which means that there is an equal customer who can come up with building the product and ensuring that he's part of the risk, this is going to be continue like this for a longer time. Then interoperability to other devices in the network is also not owned by the OEM because each OEM comes up with its own speciality of products and the end-to-end integration lies with the system integrator. Also the current deployments, in case of a brownfield deployment, which already has other companies' products, they do not share the specific details to enable interoperability. Then moving on specifically, there is also a very high entry barrier for anybody to enter into the telecom manufacturing. The first thing is there is a very high initial cost price for hardware manufacturing and assembly. The second is there is a high cost of technology development. Most of the technology development happens by the foreign firms with their R&D centers within India, but the IP ownership within India is very, very low. The third thing is there is a very high cost of maintenance and enhancement costs associated whenever a product has to be maintained in terms of product support, bug fixing, and enhancement to increase the capability of the network. One more key challenge we face is the RFPs and the tenders. They tend to focus on the make and model numbers of the existing products instead of the user requirements. There are two different ways of stating the user requirements. One is in terms of the features required. The second is in terms of the features which are available with the current product's make and model number. And this is something that is a major deterrent for new players in this market. The third thing is drafting of requirements is done in consultation with the leading already present telecom and networking firms. And this is also a disadvantage because this drafting is always done to exclude the Indian firms. So the clauses are defined by those firms to create exclusion of indigenous products. How the consultation, how the leading firms work is they form a matrix of what features cannot be supplied by any Indian firm, and they ensure that those clauses are mandatory in the tenders and the RFP. And this creates a lot of time and effort to prove that this is an exclusion clause. Wrapping up, what is needed to promote indigenization? The first thing is the RFP and tenders has to be drafted in neutral terms, stating just the user requirements in terms of what is required for the feature for the user to have the network working, up and running, and not in terms of what is required in terms of the product OEM's capability building, which has been developed over the years. And there also has to be a means of asserting indigenous firms. Now, there are two things. One is there are foreign OEMs which have their R&D center in India versus the IP which is owned by the Indian firm. This is a key differentiator. So we need to have a means of differentiating and asserting what is an indigenous firm and a kind of certificate and a tag associated with it. Also, we need to have focus groups with accountability for cyber security, network security, and information security, which has to be completely within the country. Along with that, critical sections have to be defined for telecom networks, and this includes things like the core data center and the core networking devices which is associated with the data center and with the critical infrastructure equipment, and the public and private external players should not, private and public external players to be allowed. This has to be defined very clearly just so that the core information security is retained. There also has to be a support for deployable level of maturity in products. Whenever there is a product, there is something called total cost of ownership. This total cost of ownership includes the upfront cost that we do for the product, plus the amount that you will spend on the product over a period of time in terms of annual maintenance, bug fixing, all the support that we will have. So in the total cost of ownership, when we look at Chinese products, the initial cost is always very, very low compared to the rest of the cost. But as and when the deployment is done, the total cost of ownership is always much higher because the control is always, the product is bought. So any annual maintenance, any enhancement, any maintenance will have to be given to the same firm, and that cost of ownership becomes very, very high. This is a brief overview of the telecom products, and the reference is a PMI DOT policy. These are the products required for a setting up of the wired and wireless infrastructure within the country, which includes the platform, the wired products, which is like the broadband and which is connected via the OFC and copper cables, wireless network products, which includes our mobile communication towers, the software which is associated with the 4G and the 5G management, and the applications which deal with all of the triple play, voice, video, data, and other video services. So this is what is required in terms of product OEMs within the country. This sums up from L&T.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I request Mr. Parag Naik to start his presentation and also keep to a time limit of 10 to 12 minutes. Mr. Naik, you can share your slide.
Yeah, thank you, Santosh. Big shoes to fill in, and thanks for the for the invite here. In a relay race, the last guy has to be the fastest, so I'll try and keep it less than 6-7 minutes. I hope
you have 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes. Can you maximize the screen?
Okay. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, but it's not full screen.
Okay.
If you can just expand that, it will be better.
Yes, sure, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just very quickly about Sankhya. That's no pun intended of 14 years of staying alive. It's a very difficult, hostile environment in India to build hardware startups, especially of the semiconductor variety. And I can tell you, spin a lot of stories on what we have gone through. in just staying alive for 14 years. That's our biggest achievement so far, I would say. Not just that, we are India's first fabless semiconductor company. Also, in the last 3 years, growing almost 25 to 50% year on year. Just to highlight the fact that these industries have a very long gestation period, and ironically, it's like a Chinese bamboo tree. You have to feed it and a lot of water before it sprouts, and when it does sprout, it grows in about less than 3 months. That's the nature of this business. And I'll expand on some of those metaphors a little later. We have about 70 plus patents, 5 of them potentially for future generation 6G and beyond, also 5G and beyond. We have 200 top engineers in Bangalore and in Pune, and so far invested $35 million in R&D. We probably invest one of the highest, apart from Tejas, of course. Tejas is a bigger company than us for our size or any other size, and I'll argue that this has been one of the problems in India. We also are, in fact, there's this lot of talk about whether can India do it, right? We tend to have disbelief in our own abilities. I don't know, for whatever reasons, historical and otherwise. It's easier for the Americans and the Europeans to have trust on our technologies, and we are in fact rolling out based on our technology. Later part of this year, one US operator is rolling out a 5G network. So been there and done that in some sense, right? So if we can do it in the US, we therefore can do it in India by implication. We tend to follow what I call the Swami Vivekananda route. The route to Delhi goes via Chicago. If he was not accepted, if he had not made the address in Chicago, I don't think he was a wandering monk in India before he went to Chicago, right? That's the problem. So you have to prove yourself first and then come here. Gandhiji had to prove himself in South Africa before he was accepted here. That's the irony of this country, for whatever it is worth. I'll just give you a perspective of my own perspective. I'm no expert on any of these things. It's what I call, we are all these country dogs, right? Who don't have these fancy degrees, but most of this has been taught to us by life and competing with the Chinese. So we are one of the few guys who actually compete along with Tejas with the Chinese guys. And in the past, we have also supplied technology to both Taiwan and South Korea. So if you see this, one of the things that they do again is this sign on Indian roads, start early and arrive early. And speed thrills but kills. So what we tend to do is we wait until the last minute, and then suddenly we want everything tomorrow morning. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in R&D. It doesn't happen anywhere else. So these guys have at least 10-15 plans, and I've noticed a correlation between the trajectory they followed even in the medal tally in Olympics. So if you look at it very carefully, they look at these 15, 20, 25-year plans. And since 80 to now, they probably are the second after the US to have the highest number of medal tallies. And they've gone about it systematically, right? It's also, they look at the low-hanging fruits, start small, no grandiose plans, no verbose stuff, very practical people. And let's give them credit for that, right? I think we keep harping about that, but there is some credit that we need to give it. And finally, you have to learn to walk before you run. So that's the idea. Start small, but be part of the supply chains. For example, just, some of our plans are so grandiose, or NTPs and some of the plans earlier is that we want to be net, from a semiconductor perspective, we want to be net zero in imports. Those are grandiose plans, right? They are never executable on the ground. And the most important part is that their execution strategy is designed by the Chinese, where at least they follow democracy here, by the Chinese, for the Chinese, and of the Chinese. And here, the big four, or people from abroad mostly follow, set our policies and set our directions, right? And mostly by paper pushers, unfortunately, who actually don't have real on-ground experience. And then one of the key areas also is they identify strategic areas and take risks, provide risk capital and take risks, right? In India, we want to build, a lot of times we go there, they want us to build a chip by giving us 50 lakhs and 1 crore. So if you pay peanuts, you only get monkeys at the end of the day, right? So technology business is hard and it costs a lot of money. And 50 lakhs is the cost of one engineer for 6 months in Bangalore. Some of my panelists will bear testimony to that. And then what they do is back their national champions to the hilt. Like Rajiv said, you give them incubated markets. There's nothing like an incubated market. And I'll argue here also the kind of monies that they pour in. Just a little sidetrack, but Samsung alone has committed $100 billion. Huawei spent $5 billion just on building their patent portfolio for 5G, right? All of our companies together in India, private and public, don't invest this kind of money in R&D, right? And then, Taiwan is not, not China, but you have to know how these industries were built. Taiwan is today the world's factory for semiconductors because of one man, an expat who was looked over for promotion close to his retirement in the US. He used to work for Texas Instruments. And in the 80s, he built TSMC, which is now the largest semiconductor fabrication unit in the world. Just to give you an example of how Huawei did this, right? This is a very interesting story that Dr. Paul Raj of Stanford, who was also in the Hall of Fame in Stanford, gave at IISc. He said there were two companies in the 80s, in the mid 80s, we were both on parity. In fact, India had ITI. We were ahead of China in terms of R&D, right? So ITI today is driven down to ground. There's not much R&D that they do. They just do manufacturing. And there's this other company in IIT Madras, which was incubated and had this wonderful technology called wireless local loop. And Huawei had nothing. Huawei just started off and had 2 orders from the Chinese government. So today we don't know about that IIT Madras company. It's now part of Tejas. And Huawei is what it is, $50 billion juggernaut or a giant. And this is a story that I've understood. In fact, when we started off Sankhya, we thought, we'll build this beautiful technology, go there, and we'll become a $1 billion company in about 5 years. What I've realized is operationalizing a technology is far more difficult than actually building it. And for operationalizing is where you need all the ecosystem support, right? It's easy to build technologies, but very difficult to operationalize it. And then their trajectory itself also, started off being a fringe player, literally a fringe player in 3G. They started at the bottom, they're bottom scrapers. In 4G, they kind of mainstream. And 15 years later or 20 years later, they are a leader in 5G, one of the leaders in 5G. And that's why we have Saul Broha from the US on their technology. And Huawei, you have to also understand that they started very early in India, in Bangalore. Bangalore is a city of mercenaries. So you pay, double the amount, you'll have engineers jumping. It's some sense good, but then it's not good for the longer term, strategic product development, landscape. So they started in 97 by actually doubling salaries of every other MNC that had in Bangalore. That's how they did it. And then they have been getting generous grants, and the source here is Wall Street Journal, more than 60 billion. Sorry, I was corrected by Smita ji in the morning. It is $75 billion in 20 years. Can you believe what you can do with $75 billion? That we're struggling with $35 million. We have come this far. Tejas probably has invested about 200 million to 250 million and see where they want. Imagine if you get 2 billion, 3 billion, or 5 billion to play with. And also contrast this with what we have done for our 5G advancement in India. The DOT has actually given about 250 crores to 4 IITs to go build a test bed for 5G. Where is 250 crores and where is $60 billion? So what ails our R&D system? I think all of you know it. It's our trader mindset. The private investors feel that guys like me are all crazy fellows, hobbyists who can't build a business. There's no way you can build a hardware or a semiconductor business in India. So we are all busy selling, lingerie on the internet or selling food on the internet and building these online kirana stores, and that's the problem. The risk and reward equation is inverted here in the sense that it's easier to make money by putting that same money, in land or in other unproductive assets. That's the problem. It's easier to make money for rentiers. From our policy perspective, most of our policy models are utopian. They try to keep the gamers out, and that results in what I call the reverse Chakravyuha. You are not allowing the Abhimanyus to enter, right? Abhimanyus like us to enter. The idea is you have to have Abhimanyus like us enter and not allow them to get out. So it's the opposite. You are incentivizing the dishonest guys to get into the system, whereas and making your policy so difficult that you don't want the honest guys to get in, right? And mostly, like in China, most of these are headed by subject matter experts, not generalists who have a wide domain of expertise. And also, very often we miss the fact that this whole startup and R&D business is the yin and yang of it, right? Innovation and failure are linked together. Is extremely statistical, right? So you don't have to look further from nature for this. You can't plan to create a Huawei, right? You can't plan to create an Intel. You can't plan to create a Google. You can create conditions to make one of them. And how do you do that? You have to have critical mass. In fact, if you look at crocodiles, I look at all these nature videos, the crocodiles, we see the 20 foot, 20, 30 foot crocodiles that you see. But, we all think that all the crocodiles go there. But in the mother crocodile actually lays 250 or 300 eggs before one or two of them go to that size. That's what startups are also. That metaphor is there even in startups. If you have 200, 300 of them doing the same thing, there's a potential that one of them will go, right? You could checkbox all your items. You could be smart, you could be working hard and all of that. But if you don't have the right time, right place, and a little bit of luck, you won't go anywhere. That's the problem. That is the deterministic mindset is one of the things that actually ails our R&D system. What should be done? I think follow the Chinese model and the American model of identifying challenges. In fact, even the Valley, Silicon Valley, there's a lot of material on it. Initially, before venture capital came in probably the late 60s or the 70s. Before that, the Department of Defense actually built the Valley by giving them generous contracts. Not on L1, okay? They never did L1 contracts. Here we have this dreaded NCNC, no commitment, no cost. At least that has to be that's a big barrier for building technology, right? And I like to see Make in India. I mean, most of Make in India is messaging. The messaging of Make in India is like a crutch. Okay, you guys can't build it. Here's what I'm doing it for you. I look at it as a tailwind, right? We have won in spite of our size against really large $50 billion vendors, right? In the international markets. So imagine if I get a little bit of tailwind. If Tejas gets a bit of tailwind, imagine where we could actually go. Handhold these companies, whoever these are, until they reach a critical mass. And we have done that. We have done that with ISRO, we have done with Park, and we have done it in mission mode projects in BrahMos and other places. So that model exists in India. Where you want to do it, you can do it, right? Give them tax grants and all of that. And finally, if you look at most offices in India, we have this, triumvirate of Lakshmi, Saraswati, and Ganesh, right? They actually signify a very deep metaphor. Lakshmi is money, wealth, finance. Saraswati is knowledge, and Ganesh is management, right? Ganesh goes around solving everybody's problems in mythology. So all these three have to be in balance. So today, in some of our companies, we have too much of Saraswati, right? And in the larger companies in India, it's too much of Lakshmi. If Lakshmi drives too many things, you'll get a trader mindset. You go to short term. If you do Saraswati, then you go on forever doing R&D, right? So you need a Ganesh to balance these two out and get a perspective to all of it. And eventually, the big distrust of private companies, I think that's going away with the messaging that's coming in from the government. So a good public-private partnership will also go a long way in actually building the ecosystem. That's all I have. I hope I finished.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Naik. That was a very inspired presentation to end today's speakers' chance to give their presentation. Now, while I wait for questions in the chat box, I can't see any hands raised. There is one comment on Zoom. I think Zoom made some announcement about having servers in India, so I'm not sure. But anyway, let me pose questions in the reverse order. I will now start with Mr. Naik. So, Mr. Naik, my question to you is: you very rightly said, it takes a very long time to develop all these technologies and all that. So, my question to you is: forgive me, I don't have a technological background, but as a layperson, my question is: if that is true, what is the shortest route for India to reduce dependency on Chinese equipment? Is there a shortcut? Because if it takes really long time, then what is I can't understand. There's a contradiction here. We need a long time to sort of develop capabilities which can actually substitute our dependency on China. That is my question to you. 1 minute. I'll just read out all the questions so that the other speakers have time to compose their thoughts before I give you a turn. Next, my question is for Ms. Charulata. My question to you is, see, many countries have also realized the risk posed by Chinese telecom equipment and devised many models to deal with it. Like, for example, I think UK has a testing type of model where they have a testing facility and they test the equipment, while many other countries have completely outright banned Chinese equipment. So is there thinking on this kind of a model in India, and what shape will that take? Because as I told in my opening remarks, last week there was a surprise that after 1 year of this anti-China backlash and reducing dependency, we had a contract being awarded to Huawei. So what is the model that India is working towards, or what do you think is most suitable if we have to live with the dependency for a few more years before we shore up our capabilities? My third question to Mr. Mahajan, this is again coming from a common sense perspective. While we are witnessing this kind of dependency on the hardware side, telecom equipment, I saw in the presentations also that there's a lot of hacking attacks. Is reducing dependency on hardware a foolproof way to secure our systems? Because people believe these days that software can be manipulated anywhere, whether the equipment is sourced from China or elsewhere. If somebody wants to attack our grid infrastructure, it is always possible. So I would request your comments on this question. And lastly, my last question to Ambassador Purushottam, with her background in foreign policy and international diplomacy. We've recently had the first meeting of the Quad leaders virtually, which took place. Now, of course, it has many dimensions. Is there a technology dimension to the Quad? And if so, is that relevant for what we have spoken about today in reducing our dependency on China? So that is those are my 4 questions. I request Mr. Nayak to first have a go at answering the question. And please.
Yes, Santoshi, yes. So you are absolutely right. It's a paradox, but the way we already have green shoots, right? There is us. There are 2 other companies. There is Tejas. There are other people already there, right? So we already are part of this supply chain. So the way you do it is that when you set up a 15-year or 10-15-year plan, you take baby steps. You say, I'll be 5% of the whole supply chain. I talk about telecom and hardware right now. I won't talk about the rest of the stuff, but it follows more or less the same. But I put actionable, saying I'll do 2% of the global telecom chain 5 years on. You put those actionables. And we are already doing it to an extent, right? All you do is, that's why we said you take these champions, give them the support that is required. And you're already starting off from a base, right? And but what you do is you start off as maybe kind of a mainstream player, or maybe I would say a fringe or in 4G and mainstream player in 5G. And then when 6G does come in, we should be the leaders and we should be driving what 6G is going to look like.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Charulata, if you can take your question, please.
Yeah, so this is regarding the reducing the dependency when we are yet to build the technical capability for the same. For 5G, IIT Madras already has a 5G testbed which is set up. Beta deployments and testbeds can be set up for the same. But the best way to start is to start with players which have R&D which is set up within India, and to devise the network solution infrastructure in such a way that these can be leveraged instead of having it using the OEMs which are not from here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mahajan?
Yeah, thank you, Santosh. It's a very, very good question. But what I would like to say here is that today, India has all the capability to replace Chinese products. So as I mentioned in my presentation, DOT came out with a list of 36 products which are important for any telecom operator. And believe me, all those products can be supplied by Make in India sources. For time being, if Government of India takes this step that they say, like done in BSNL 4G network, that we will buy only Indian product. Within 1 year, you will see Indian companies jumping out with a lot of products, a lot of technologies, and it will be totally made in India. On your specific question on security, yes, if the Indian products get deployed in the network, security can be ensured because we can manufacture hardware also in India and software anyways our strength. So if both these products come from Indian companies, then obviously all the securities like we faced in Power Grid or anywhere, that can be taken care of and we will have very secure networks. Thank you.
Good to hear that. Thank you. Ambassador Purushottam?
Thank you. This is a really thought-provoking question, and I've been thinking about it myself. So you see, first of all, let us understand that the basic problem between US and China is on technology. I had said many years ago that it is going to be a technology war, and the other things are just trappings. In fact, on trade, the US has failed to achieve its goals by launching the trade war. But in technology, it persists. So as you also know, a lot of articles have come out regarding a techno-democratic alliance. The Americans have been talking about it, and the UK has been talking about it, T10. And so if there's going to be a grouping, it's going to comprise countries like India. However, having said, and of course, sorry, I must also add that in the Quad perspective, the Indo-Pacific Command has just been set up, and the commander has just given a statement to Congress in which he's talked about India being one of the defining partnerships of the United States, but he's also talked about interoperability, about the Comcasa, how that enables that, and so on. So we have to be a little on our guard, not because it is a bad idea. It is a very good idea because the Americans have the best technologies in the world, but we cannot surrender our technological independence. And I would urge perhaps our companies to come into enter into collaborations with the American counterparts and others, so that we can become forward, as you say, forward compatible, with them. And I think Mr. Parag Naik has already initiated that. He's mentioned that he's going to supply technology for the 5G rollout of a particular American operator. So I think it would be a good idea to go along those lines so that we preserve our technological independence and join this alliance with a very confident basis.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I'll turn to the audience. So I request Mr. Shailendra Mehta to go ahead and ask his question.
Yes, thank you. First of all four speakers were very insightful and on point. So congratulations, Mr. Pai, for putting together an excellent panel. I have two very brief questions.
Thank you.
One for the panelists and one for you, Mr. Pai. One for the panelists, that is, how good is the vRAN technology, the virtual radio networks, basically, and can they basically provide a totally different way of bypassing Huawei and ZTE to bring the Indian companies? As you know, Tech Mahindra has a collaboration with Rakuten, presumably Jio has one, L&T and others. So how good is that, number one? And secondly, for you, Mr. Pai, you are one of the few individuals who actually work with Indian and Chinese companies on both sides, right? So can you basically tell us one of the biggest challenges that we face in India is lack of information. So and it's partly because of the language barrier, though it is much less of a barrier because of translation, automatic translation. Can you share with us some of your strategies of how you stay up to date with China?
Okay, first I'll ask the panelists to respond to your question. Who would like to take that question? Please speak up. I can't see all of you together.
I can
yes,
take it.
Mr. Naik. Yeah, Mr. Naik, please.
Yeah, so we are working on vRAN. That's actually there's this whole movement in telecom now coming up called ORAN or Open RAN. That's appending the entire telecom ecosystem and creating a new set of vendors. And that's where companies like us who are small, nimble, and got very niche IPRs will play a big role in the future. So the way this whole vRAN thing is shaping up is that I guess some of you who looked at telecom, you know that everything is getting software defined. There's software defined this and software defined that, which means software is going to drive a lot of these networks. And this is telco network is going to look like a typical IT cloud network. And once that happens, there's an inflection point there, and there's a very big play that that we can offer because of our software strength, and also of course our system integration strength through Tech Mahindra and to TCS and other companies.
So can I add a bit here, Santosh?
Sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So in addition to what Parag said, yes, vRAN technology we can obviously offer, and all of our companies are working towards it. But I also want to add, in the present setup, let's say vRAN is what we are looking forward in due course of time, whatever are the requirements for operators in today's networks. That also Indian companies are capable of doing. And as I mentioned in the BSNL's recent tender, whatever specifications they have come out with, our Indian companies are able to meet those specifications. So the situation is today that with the capabilities we have in India, we can do whatever is required and whatever challenges are given to us, given some time to execute it. So hope I answered.
Anyone else want to take that question from the panel?
Yeah, one more point is the vRAN, anything which is virtualized and which involves software development, India is already a leader in software development. So the movement to virtualization and less of hardware development, India always has an advantage.
Okay. Thank you. I'll now take that question which Mr. Shailendra Mehra had for me about how to how to keep track of what's happening in China. There are a lot of much more learned China watchers in this room. I'm actually a part-time China watcher because I'm also a lawyer, and I don't really have any serious area of research or interest. But having said that, this is a moving target. I use a number of techniques. One is, of course, I interact with a lot of Chinese almost on a day-to-day basis who are from a wide range of industries. Although they may not tell me specifically what's happening, when they come to me with questions about what they want to do in India and so on, I get a lot of insights about what's happening in China. Then secondly, social media is a big part of news in China today because the official media is controlled by the state. So people tend to sort of get a pulse of what's happening in China through social media. So that's one more way. And as a lawyer, I must say that China is actually becoming more and more friendly for foreigners to observe what's happening in China. Most of their important announcements or regulations and laws and so on, they're almost simultaneously available in English. So language has ceased to be too much of a barrier. And because it's a planned economy, everything is known in advance. This year itself, they have pivoted towards domestic dual circulation economy. The recent annual work report of the Chinese government is based on the half-year report which was presented 6-7 months ago. So if you keep track of a few major sources of information, which is government, social media, and also people actually in the industry, it will give you a very balanced view of what's happening. Most people who rely officially exclusively on the official media, I suppose will not get a balanced view. But if you temper the official media with the information and sources from other places, I think that is what I do. Of course, if anyone else wants to add something more constructive from the audience, I will be happy to give them a chance. But any other questions for the panelists on today's topic? I can't see any more questions in the chat box. Neither do I see. Yeah, sorry, there is one. Sorry. Mr. Narayan Prasad Ramachandran, to all the panelists, his question is, what are the incentives to build products and technologies in India? Does it make sense to build it only for India? Is protectionism good long term? So which of the panelists would like to take this question? I think after this, we might have time for one more question, but otherwise this will be the last question.
Can I answer to this?
Sure, please.
So, like the answer to this is that what we are developing in India, this is not just for India. Let's say today, in today's economy, the way it is shaping up, lot of mistrust is there for China, and all major economies, they are looking for an option which is next to China or which can be more trusted as compared to Chinese. So whatever products and technologies we are developing today, and since Indian people, Indian companies, they have a lot of good reputation worldwide, these products are going to carry value everywhere else. And today also we are selling, as I mentioned, we are selling to more than 75 countries. There is very good acceptance which we are getting. So if product development is incentivized in India, it's going to be great boon for Indian economy.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. If you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, so basically what's good for India in telecom spectrum, what's good for India is good for the rest of the world, because we are the world's second largest telecom market, right? And also from our perspective, we were not restricting this to India. Ours is a global play. In fact, we get more, see, like I said, we got to be accepted outside before we can sell here. That's the challenge that we have. Selling in India for me is a bigger challenge than selling outside.
Thank you. I see one hand here. Admiral Muralidharan, please.
Thank you.
Please ask your question.
My question is to Mr. Nayak, since from his presentation, since he quoted about Dr. Paul Raj or Commodore Paul Raj as I know him. Now, one of the reasons, as you know, he didn't get the kind of support here. That's why he went away to Stanford. Do you think our policies have changed to encourage people like Stanford to come back to India, or to have encourage people like him to come up? Or is there any policy change further needed?
No, sir, not that I see of. In fact, sometimes it's so frustrating that we also want to relocate to the US. It's easier there to do that, right? Because it's, I mean, that's the anguish of this. And yeah, Dr. Paul Raj is a classic case, right? Not just him. Look at all the top CEOs, right? We celebrate that. Actually, we should be celebrating Sundar Pichai and all these guys becoming CEOs. It's a failure of the Indian system that they go out and they get recognition.
Exactly. Very true.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's now 4:16. I think we need to draw this session to a close. Thank you very much for all the panelists, Ambassador Purushottam, Mr. Mahajan, Charulata, and Mr. Nayak. Your inputs have greatly benefited the China watching community. This talk will also be available on YouTube for future reference. I thank you all for taking the time and joining us today. And I also thank all the participants for their active participation and asking questions and sitting through the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.